The last generation was crazy. This generation is genuinely weird. And honestly, I'm frightened for the next one. Because when we're living in a generation where having a high body count is something to keep score of and everybody's proud of it, where sleeping around is no longer dishonorable, a generation where walking outside half naked for no reason is normalized, a generation where morals are apparently subjective, a generation where people are getting murdered in cold blood every day, a generation where people like to do whatever they want, however they want, without any consequences, a generation where people like to make up their own definitions, a generation where loyalty is based on how financially stable you are and how much you can provide for somebody, a generation where love is no longer love, it's no longer unconditional, it's conditional based on how happy you make someone every day, a generation where a lot of feminists are no longer fighting for equality but superiority, a generation where women simply don't feel safe to walk out on the street, a generation where people don't know how to commit, a generation where people just like to lie every day, a generation where people completely ignore facts, a generation where people ignore the actual facts, make up their own facts to make themselves feel better, a generation where statistics are apparently irrelevant, a generation where being a gentleman is now misogynistic, a generation where being a bad bitch means being a bad person, a generation where people just don't like themselves, a generation where suicide rates are through the roof, a generation where the mental health of people in secondary school now is the mental health that people had back in the day in mental asylums. I could go on and on and on. A generation that is purely based off immorality, foolishness, and pure nonsense, lack of common sense. When we're living in a generation like this, can you blame me for wanting to go back to the Jurassic period? I don't care if you disagree with some of that. It's the truth, and quite frankly, the truth hurts. Because we're also in a generation where people don't like the truth. A generation where lies are better than the truth. A generation where people prefer the bad person over the good person in a relationship. I mean, that's been a couple generations, to be fair. A generation filled with snowflakes that can't handle other people's opinions. And if anybody has an opinion separate from what the majority think, you are officially a terrible person. And honestly, if that's this generation, can you blame me for being worried, majorly concerned, desperately concerned for the future generation? This is the generation we live in now. Are you proud of it? Because I sure as hell aren't. But you know, good for you people who think those things are normal. Probably the same people within this generation, a generation where cheating is normalized. I said what I said.